Yeah, so welcome everyone to Wallarm's webinar edition. We're going to be talking about gaining security context with API session data. It's me, myself, Raymond Kirk. I'm a senior product manager here with Wallarm, and I have my wonderful colleague with me, Tim Evers, our field CTO. Sweet. So, as we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will have time for questions and answers later on during the presentation. So please place all your questions in the chat, either Zoom or LinkedIn, wherever you're joining us from. And also, remember to follow us on LinkedIn for the latest news, research, and product updates. Why are we here? Today's session is really around, a gap that we've seen in the market. API security tools often lack context. So there's alerts for attacks, but there's been a big gap in the context on how people are interacting. So if you could go to the next slide for me, Evers. Oftentimes people see one attack with security tools that are out there today. If you go to the next slide, all right, yep, there we go. What we're talking about today is API sessions, and not only will we be highlighting individual attacks, but we'll be showing you the interactions between the attack before and after for your endpoints. Next slide, please. So I've actually talked to a lot of practitioners in the field, and one of the things that continue to show up is are these basic needs here. So like why is context important? So when I talk to practitioners, these things come up. They need to build a timeline, a narrative of what happened, and also post-mortem materials. So that's all around identifying patterns and then implementing controls for your post-mortem activities. So that's why API sessions and why context is important. I'm going to pass it over to Tim Evers to actually show us what this looks like within the Wallarm platform and give us a quick demo. Thank you.
So typically when you're working with security products, you'll see all the different things that are being blocked time and time again. Whatever the context of the type is, all you're seeing is what's being blocked. What you're not seeing is the context around what's being blocked or why what they're doing is bad behavior, especially when you get into stateless types of attacks that may not be a specific attack type, but maybe they just have the business logic that that particular session is using may not look like all of the other sessions. And at that point, you have to look at how you display those types of click streams or request streams in a little bit different manner. So with API sessions, the first thing we do is we work with you to configure what you want your sessions to be based on. Those sessions can be based on anything in the request, whether that's in the header, whether that's a cookie, whether that's maybe a JWT, and you want us to use your sub or your user name as the session identifier. Could be customer IDs in a JSON body. Any of those things in a request we can use as our session identifier. Once we have those session identifiers, then what we start doing is instead of just taking IPs and looking at things via IPs, what we're actually doing is using the keys that we've set up and using those as the unique identifiers. So if you're on a mobile device and you're mobile and you pull up to your house and you move to your house network because you're not driving, of course, we'll actually show you in that particular session that you've moved and changed IPs, so the people watching what's going on can know that you've moved that session from maybe a cellular provider to your home network. So what that looks like, we're going to look at something that's really my favorite. So we'll look for all the different attack types that we have on login. So here you'll see we'll see 2 attacks. These 2 attacks are out of 104. So so these are all of the different attacks that are happening. Here you'll see that we've taken these 2 particular attacks and made them and identified them as scanners. And of those, because of the way that the filtering node is, they're just in monitoring. But this particular user agent is actually the key to this particular session. So now we can see that this user tried to register, then log in, then register, and then did a number of logins as that session went along. So either there's something wrong with their login or they're trying to manipulate the login across the board. And you can see that those just keep going. So what's important here is the idea that there is context to that one particular attack. Here's another attack. We have all the different attack types here on the left. We have the user IPs, the types of the request types, whether they're gets, posts, or puts, and then all the different response codes. All of these are filters. So if we want to see all the forbiddens, we can take a look at that and show you all of the different logins that were forbidden and why they were forbidden. So here you'll see we'll have a SQL injection. That SQL injection was in the login, and we show you what that looks like here. And they did more of that as we continue. And then we can see all the requests around those. So here you'll see 500s and 200s, and then the SQL injections. So why is this important? Well, we might want to go back and look at what they were doing here on the logins and why they were doing logins. And maybe we want to put a brute force type of trigger around these types of attacks. And it helps us bring context to everything that's going on for this particular session. And this is how API sessions work, and why it's so important to have that context is so that you can see the full context of what that particular session is doing. And then we have, again, a number of ways we can do that. This one is actually based on the user agent header, but again, we can do it on anything. Now you'll also see that some of these APIs have API discovery insights. So from here, you can actually explore these in API discovery, and we'll bring you to where that login is and any types of sensitive data or all the number of requests and hits, and then what the risk is of being attacked on that particular endpoint. So it's a great way to look at the data that is inside that particular endpoint that could be manipulated if those attackers were to get through. Another good thing with sessions is, especially with the abuse types of attacks, a lot of times what happens is you have a security company say that's a bot, and you have to take their word on it because you don't know why it's a bot. So what we've done is with sessions, what we've done is we've gone through, you can see the different attack types, and then you can see what's going on with those. And then once we see that it's a different account, so this one in particular, account takeovers, we'll start blocking these as these are added to the deny list. And so here you can see the different detectors that have been triggered by this particular attack. But you can see everything that's going on in that session, which is really interesting. When you have account takeovers, you can actually see account takeovers in these particular sessions. And if there's lots of sessions from IPs, you can actually see that as well. So it's a good thing to look at. It's a great feature for our product. It's really fun to watch customers traffic and help them see what's going on in the context of API sessions.
100%. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, let's recap a little bit here. So we've noticed that with API sessions, you're provided high-level groupings of different details like the attack types, user IPs, and response codes. Tim, can you talk about why that's important, though?
So being able to filter a session by these particular filters allows you to get into the attack and get into the session. So you can go very deep on a particular response code or a particular type, and then you can go very broad to see all of them different attacks. It just helps you get to the root cause faster. which is why we put these here so that you could see what each of these different filters are doing inside of the context of the session.
100%, 100%. And then we also highlight within these sessions if we've detected an attack with those payloads. So yeah, I apologize. I think I jumped ahead a little bit.
You did. It's okay. It's okay. So the first thing we want to talk about here is the sessions, right? The parameters of the sessions that we talked about. So these parameters are settable and configurable by the customer. We can show them as part of the session. We have lots of customers that are looking at JSession IDs or looking at JWTs, and we're pulling different configurations out of them, out of those. But again, these are really important to help you key on those particular users versus looking at just IP and user agents. It's become futile to look at IPs and user agents because they're so easy to forge.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And then to my previous point, we also highlight the detected attacks.
Yep, and these are important so that you can see what's going on in that session. So, you know, there's different types of attacks. We'll show you the bodies. We'll show you everything that's going on, and then what actually happened with that particular payload. Did we block it? Did we not block it? Depending on how you have the filtering nodes set.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And I think the most exciting part about this is our next slide here, where we actually empower users to take action.
Yeah,
Tim,
and these actions, you know, are really are very typical actions. You can create a rule around that particular request. You can mark it as a false positive if we do detect something that we shouldn't have. And then we do have explore and attack. So the good thing about attacks and sessions is they work hand in hand. So you can flip back and forth. If you just want to see all the attacks that are going on, it's easy to flip back and forth between API sessions and our attack view.
makes sense. Makes sense. Oh, perfect. We're already at Q&A.
Yeah, we're flying through today.
Oh man. Let's see. I think I see one. How does Wallarm integrate with Kubernetes network solutions like Cilium, which uses eBPF for security and observability to enhance API security within a zero trust framework? That's a lot of
Yeah.
words.
Those are, yeah, but it's a very, very interesting question. So typically with Kubernetes, because we're at layer 7 and not at a lower layer 3 or 4, we'll usually sit out in front or in line with the request. We do have the ability to do eBPF if you want to use out of band, but our Kubernetes there's a number of different ways we can do Kubernetes depending on what ingress controller you're using, whether it's Envoy, Istio, or Nginx, or any of the other what feels like a bajillion different ingress controllers out there. We usually have the ability to integrate directly with those ingress controllers. And so where we enhance that zero trust framework is we can be put in any of the namespaces in Kubernetes, and we can actually look both east and west if you want to do a sidecar implementation, or north south if you want to put us at the edge. So either way works.
Thank you, Tim. I see another question here. How do you define an attack?
Yeah. So we can define attack in a number of different ways. I define them in 2 different ways. So as broad categories, there are stateful attacks and stateless attacks. So for me, stateful attacks are those that I need to understand what's coming before and what's coming after. Stateless attacks are ones that have an attack exactly in that attack, and we have a lot of different types of stateless attacks. So I'll actually flip back here because it's easier to see if you look at the different types. So we've got your typical SQL injections, SSRS, cross-site scriptings, you know, mass attacks, BOLAs, API abuse, GraphQL attacks, and then we've got an interesting set of attacks, which are API specification violations. I'm working closely with the customer right now that we're working really hard on getting their specifications exactly right. So we are close, and this is when we brought out API spec violations or spec enforcement, or I was not a big fan because it's hard, right? But then again, what I always tell customers is security is hard. So this has been a really good asset to look at the APIs coming in and make sure that they're structured correctly. And then different data handlings. So we've got a lot of different attack types. That's the stateless attacks. And then we have a number of stateful attacks, API abuse attacks, which are basically machine learning algorithms that look at the sessions that are coming in and comparing session to session and looking for outliers of those sessions for most of the different types of attacks. And that is what you'll see, what we were looking at here. And there's a number of different attack types in those, including account takeover, scraping, security crawlers, and the like. Good question.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Thank you, Tim. There's also another question. Can we integrate with Spring Boot microservices?
So we'd have to talk closer, a little bit closer about that, but my gut would tell me we probably can. We just have to understand the infrastructure of how they're looking at their gateway and how they're pushing their external traffic to those microservices. Typically, they'll have a gateway out front. Something has to direct the traffic from the outside to the inside. So we typically will look at sitting in front of those microservices.
Makes sense. This is a more general question I see in the chat. It says, "Are all attacks harmful?"
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So there are, so for me, the stateful attacks may not always be harmful, and I'll talk about those in a second. The stateless attacks, the attacks that we have known vulnerabilities for, known CVEs, CWEs for, I would consider all of those harmful attacks. Where this gets a little bit interesting is when you start looking at the stateful attacks, which is comparing traffic. So for instance, when you look at API abuse, right, when you're looking at, you might have a third-party marketing company that is coming and scraping all of your products for some of their feeds. Well, to us, that would look different than what your customers are doing. But for the business, it's not necessarily a harmful attack. You just have to know that it's going along and it's happening. So I would say no, not all attacks are harmful. There are definitely two different categories where attacks can be harmful, but then there are categories where attacks may or may not be harmful depending on if you expect them to be there or not.
Definitely makes sense. Makes sense. I see another question here. Does Wallarm integrate with MuleSoft in any way?
Yeah. So we actually have a custom policy with MuleSoft that we can actually sit inside of MuleSoft and then send requests to our filtering node through MuleSoft and then send them back. And that will either be blocked or not blocked. But yes, MuleSoft is one of our favorite integrations. I was actually testing it and working on it this morning, as a matter of fact.
Sounds good. Brandon, do you see any other questions that might be on like LinkedIn or something that we might not see?
Yeah, I just shared 2 last questions with you in the chat if you want to take a look at those.
So AWS Fargate, we do have some ways to integrate with AWS Fargate. So we have some Terraforms that we can use. We do have customers using Fargate. So that shouldn't be an issue. But I'll preface everything that everybody's architecture is different. It's some of the reasons why I have a job is because I love getting in with customers and looking at their architecture. So I would say probably yes. But in order to know more, we'd have to know more in order to get to know if we absolutely can. But we do have customers using Fargate. So the last one, I see the product document. I am interested into PDO security policies, set up an integration with Kubernetes CNI. So that question gets a little detailed. So whoever asked that, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to have a discussion with you on that. And we can talk further about that. I think that's all the questions that I see.
Sweet. Yeah, that's all I see. Anyone else out there want to drop a question in the chat? All
What's
right.
next?
Yeah, let's get into what's next then. Perfect. So we're gonna have another webinar here soon. We're gonna be going over gateways, WAF, and what's the difference. And that's gonna be December 4th. It's gonna include Mr. Evers himself and also our VP of product, Tim Erlin. And again, that's December 4th. It's gonna be at 10 a.m. Pacific time. There's a QR code, of course, on your screen to register now.
And then tomorrow, if you're in Atlanta, it's still not too late to register and for free. And we can and come down and join us. I'm actually in Atlanta right now, and we'll have a great session tomorrow. We've got some great speakers. Looking forward to all the different sessions that are going on. Learn a lot through these sessions. I've been to a number of them and MC them, and every time it's never the same. Wherever the audience wants to go is where we want to go, which is why I love these, because it's geared around, you know, the people that are there. So looking forward to anybody that's coming to that tomorrow. It's not too late.
I see one more question that popped up. Can we have access to the slides? It sounds like what they're asking.
Yeah, we'll send the slides out. Brandon does a good job of making sure that the slides are accessible. Make sure that you sign up, make sure that he has your email, and we'll send you the link to the slides, I believe.
Definitely. Definitely.
And Brandon will answer you.
There you go. Just making sure I don't see any other questions out there before we wrap this one up.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you all being here. Thanks for taking a look at API sessions and helping us with seeing the product. And Raymond, I appreciate you jumping in and helping out. It's been great doing a webinar with you. You did a great job. We appreciate all that came and all that'll listen in the future on LinkedIn and Zoom.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.